The champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered across the marble floor, but nobody moved to clean it up, because everyone in that dining room had suddenly stopped breathing. Vivienne Weston stood at the head of the table, 30 weeks pregnant, wearing a cream silk dress that her husband had chosen for her that morning, holding a printed photograph in her hand that she had found 20 minutes ago inside the breast pocket of his dinner jacket while hanging it up in the closet. She was not shaking. That was the thing that surprised her most. She had expected to shake. She had expected to cry, or scream, or do something that reflected the size of what was happening inside her chest right now. Instead she was perfectly, terrifyingly still. Elliot sat at the opposite end of the table. 8 guests between them. Candlelight. A 4-course meal that his private chef had spent 9 hours preparing. He was looking at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before, not guilt, not panic, something colder than both, and that expression told her everything the photograph had not already said. "Vivienne," he said. Calm. Controlled. Like she was a minor disruption. "Put that down." She looked at the photograph. A woman. Laughing. Sitting in the passenger seat of Elliot's car, the black Bentley he drove when he didn't want his driver to know where he was going. The woman's hand was on his jaw. His eyes were closed. He looked the way he used to look with Vivienne, in the beginning, before the distance crept in like cold air under a door. She placed the photograph flat on the table. Smoothed it once with her palm. Looked up at her husband. "Who is she?" Vivienne asked. The table was silent. A candle flickered. "We'll discuss this privately," Elliot said, already pushing back his chair. "Who is she, Elliot?" His jaw tightened. "Vivienne. I am 30 weeks pregnant." Her voice didn't rise. It dropped. Lower and steadier with every word, the way a river gets quieter right before it goes over a cliff. "I am carrying your child. I have spent the last 4 months wondering what I did wrong, why you stopped looking at me, why you flinch when I reach for your hand. And all this time," she stopped. Drew one breath. "All this time, there was a photograph in your jacket pocket." The guests were frozen. His business partner, David, had his fork halfway to his mouth and had apparently forgotten it was there. David's wife, Patricia, had her hand pressed over her lips. Nobody looked at Elliot. He stood up slowly. Straightened his jacket. And when he spoke, his voice had the particular texture of a man who had decided that the most dangerous thing in the room was his wife's composure. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, addressing the table without taking his eyes off Vivienne, "please excuse us." 3 months before that dinner, Vivienne Weston had been the happiest she had ever been in her life. She found out about the pregnancy on a Tuesday morning in early spring. She was alone in the marble bathroom of their estate, a property so large it had its own name, Ashford House, which Elliot referred to with the casual possessiveness of a man who had never wanted for anything, and she sat on the edge of the bathtub with the test in her hand and felt something bloom open in her chest so wide and warm that she pressed her free hand flat against her sternum just to contain it. She called Elliot immediately. He was in a board meeting. His assistant put her through anyway because Vivienne had learned, early in this marriage, that there were 2 ways to exist in Elliot Weston's world: you either waited, or you insisted. She had spent too long waiting. "Viv." His voice was distracted, slightly hushed. She could hear the ambient noise of a conference room in the background. "I have 12 people sitting around a table right now." "I'm pregnant," she said. Silence. "Then, say that again." "I'm pregnant, Elliot. We're having a baby." The background noise disappeared. She heard a door close. And then his voice came back, and it was different, unhushed, unguarded, the voice he used only when there was no performance required, the voice she had fallen in love with. "Are you sure? The test is in my hand." Another silence. Then a sound she hadn't heard from him in months, a laugh. Real, uncontrolled, the kind that started somewhere deep and worked its way out before the person could decide whether to let it. "I'm coming home," he said. "You have 12 people." "Vivienne. I am coming home." He was there in 40 minutes. He came through the front door still in his suit, tie loosened, and he crossed the entrance hall in 5 strides and pulled her into him with both arms and held her there, his face in her hair, neither of them speaking, and she truly thought, that this was the man she had married. That the distance of the last few months had been stress, work, the weight of running an empire worth $3 billion. That this baby would bring him back to her fully. She held on to that belief the way you hold a candle in the wind, carefully, desperately, with both hands curved around the flame. The first flag had been the phone. Elliot had always been attached to his phone, that was nothing new. But somewhere around the 3rd month of the pregnancy, something changed about the way he held it. He started turning the screen face down when she entered a room. He started taking calls in his study with the door closed, which he had never bothered to do before. He started sleeping with it on his side of the bed instead of on the charger across the room where it had lived for 2 years of their marriage. Small things. Individually meaningless. Collectively, a pattern she kept trying to unsee. The second flag had been the distance. Not the emotional distance, that had been growing slowly for months, like a tide going out so gradually you don't notice until your feet are suddenly dry. This was physical distance. He had stopped reaching for her hand in the car. He had stopped finding reasons to touch her, the small, incidental touches that had once been so constant she had taken them completely for granted. A hand at the small of her back guiding her through a door. Fingers brushing hers when he passed her a glass. His knee against hers under the table at dinner. Gone. All of it. Quietly, without announcement. And when she reached for him, he didn't pull away exactly. He just stilled. Like something inside him was bracing. She had asked him about it once, in the early weeks. She had chosen her words carefully, the way you choose your footing on unstable ground, gently, deliberately, testing each word before putting weight on it. "Are you okay?" she had asked him one evening while he sat at his desk reviewing contracts. "You seem far away lately." He had looked up. Studied her face for a moment. Then he had set down his pen and said, with the patience of someone explaining something to a person they have already explained it to twice, "I'm under a significant amount of pressure right now, Vivienne. The Meridian project is not going well. I need you to be patient with me." "I am patient with you," she said. "I just miss you." Something shifted in his expression, not softening exactly, more like a door being shut very quietly. "I'm right here," he said. And picked up his pen. She had gone back to the living room and sat on the sofa and looked out at the garden for a long time without seeing it. The third flag, the one she should have paid more attention to, was the cologne. Elliot had worn the same fragrance for as long as she had known him. Cedar and black pepper and something faintly smoky underneath, expensive and specific, the kind of scent that became so associated with a person that you smell it on a stranger and feel a complicated flash of something in your chest. She knew that scent the way she knew his voice, his handwriting, the particular way he exhaled when he was about to say something he had been rehearsing. But in the 5th month, she started smelling something else on him when he came home late. Something floral. Delicate. Not his. The first time it happened she assumed he had stood near someone at an event. The second time she thought perhaps it was a new hand soap at the office. The third time she pressed her face into his shoulder when he slid into bed at midnight and the smell hit her clearly, unmistakably, the scent of a woman who was not her. The third time, she lay in the dark and felt the first real crack run through the foundation of everything she had built her life on. She didn't say anything. She was 5 months pregnant, and she was terrified, and she was not ready. So she painted the nursery instead. She ordered more furniture. She attended her prenatal appointments alone, because Elliot had missed the last 3 due to meetings that could not be rescheduled, and she sat in the waiting room surrounded by couples and smiled at the receptionist and said yes. Her husband sent his apologies. He was very busy, he was very involved, he was very much looking forward to meeting his child. She was so good at performing fine that she almost convinced herself. Almost. The dinner party had been Elliot's idea. That should have been the first thing she noticed, because Elliot had not initiated a social event in their home in almost 8 months. He preferred controlled environments, restaurants he had reservations at, clubs where he was known, spaces where the dynamics were already established. He did not generally invite people into his home unless there was a specific strategic reason for it. But he had come to her 3 weeks after the floral scent incident, on a Sunday morning while she was eating breakfast alone at the kitchen island, and he had said, with a warmth she had almost forgotten the temperature of, "I want to have people over for dinner next Friday. Something intimate. 8 or 10 people. Will you help me plan it?" She had looked at him over her orange juice. He was freshly showered, leaning against the counter, arms crossed, watching her with the particular half-smile that had once been enough to make her forget every concern she had ever had. "You want to have a dinner party," she said. "I want to have a dinner party," he confirmed. "You haven't wanted to have people over since February." "I've been stressed since February." He uncrossed his arms. Moved toward her. Placed both hands on the counter on either side of her and looked at her in a way that was so close to the old Elliot, the one who had seen her across a silent auction table and decided she was worth stopping for, that her chest ached with the proximity of it. "I want to do something normal. Something good. You've been patient with me, Viv. Let me do this for us." She searched his face. Found nothing she could name as dishonest. "Okay," she said. She planned the entire dinner herself. Menu, flowers, seating arrangement, the specific candles he liked because he was particular about scent and she knew every one of his preferences the way you know a language you've been living inside for years. She spent 3 days on it. She told herself this was a turning point. That he was trying. That the baby was bringing him back to her the way she had hoped. She wore the cream silk dress he had chosen for her from the closet that morning and she stood at the top of the stairs and he had looked up at her from the entrance hall and said, "You look beautiful," and she had held that sentence against her chest like something warm all the way through the first 3 courses. And then she had gone to hang up his dinner jacket, because he had taken it off between the second and third course claiming the room was warm, and she had found the photograph in the breast pocket, and the warmth she had been holding against her chest all evening turned to ice in approximately 4 seconds. The guests left quickly. That was the thing about wealthy people in uncomfortable situations, they had perfected the art of the graceful exit. Coats appeared from nowhere. Goodbyes were warm and brief and carefully constructed to acknowledge nothing that had just happened. David squeezed Elliot's shoulder on the way out in the way men squeeze each other's shoulders when they want to communicate solidarity without having to say a single honest word. Patricia hugged Vivienne a half-second longer than necessary, and in that extra half-second Vivienne felt the weight of everything the woman wanted to say and had decided not to. And then the door closed, and the house was silent, and it was just the two of them standing in the entrance hall with the wreckage of a dinner party around them and a photograph sitting on the dining table 30 feet away. Elliot spoke first. "You need to calm down." Vivienne turned to look at him slowly. "I am calm. You just humiliated me in front of 8 people, Vivienne." The sentence landed like a slap. She felt it in her sternum. "I humiliated you," she repeated. "That is what I said. There is a photograph in your jacket pocket of a woman with her hand on your face." Her voice was still steady. She did not understand how it was still steady. "And your concern right now is that I humiliated you." He exhaled through his nose. It was a sound she had come to recognize, the sound he made when he had decided that the most efficient path through a situation was to reroute it entirely. He walked past her into the dining room and picked up the photograph from the table and slid it into his trouser pocket without looking at it. "That photograph," he said, turning to face her, "is not what you think it is." "Then tell me what it is." "She is a colleague. We were at a function in Geneva in February. She had too much to drink. It was a moment. It meant nothing. She has her hand on your face, Elliot. I just told you. And your eyes are closed. Vivienne pressed one hand against her stomach, not for comfort, she realized, but because the baby had just moved, a rolling shift that reminded her with sudden ferocity exactly what the stakes of this conversation were. People don't close their eyes like that for colleagues. Elliot looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out a chair from the dining table and sat down, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, in the posture of a man who has decided to be very, very patient. Vivienne, he said. You are 30 weeks pregnant. Your hormones are. Do not. The steadiness cracked, just slightly, just at the edges. Do not tell me my hormones are the reason I am standing here asking you a reasonable question. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you are under a great deal of physical and emotional stress right now, and that stress is making you interpret things in the worst possible light. This is something Dr. Harmon warned us about, if you remember. Heightened anxiety in the third trimester. Hypervigilance. Seeing threats that. Stop. She held up one hand. Her voice had gone quiet again. Quieter than before. Stop talking. He stopped. She stood there in the cream silk dress he had chosen for her, and she noticed that detail suddenly with a new and terrible clarity, the fact that he had chosen it, that he had come to the closet that morning and pulled it out specifically and said wear this tonight, and she looked at her husband and tried to find something in his face that she recognized. Something that matched the man she had married. The man who had left a board meeting to drive 40 minutes home when she told him she was pregnant. She found nothing she could hold on to. Is there someone else? She asked. Flat. Direct. No room for rerouting. Elliot met her eyes without flinching. No. Look me in the eye and say that again. There is no one else. He said it the way he signed contracts. Certain. Practiced. Utterly without hesitation. I am your husband. You are carrying my child. I need you to hear me when I tell you that you are letting anxiety build a story that does not exist. The terrible thing, the thing she would lie awake replaying for weeks afterward, was that some part of her wanted to believe him. Not because the evidence supported it. Not because his explanation made sense. But because the alternative was a thing so large and so dark that her mind kept sliding off the edges of it, unable to find purchase. She was 30 weeks pregnant. She had no income. Her closest friend, Cora, lived 600 miles away. Her mother was gone. Her father had not spoken to her in 2 years over a disagreement about the wedding that had calcified into something neither of them had figured out how to dissolve. She was standing in an 18-room house in the middle of the night with a man who was looking at her with the calm, steady eyes of someone who had decided that the truth was entirely optional. And she was alone in a way that had nothing to do with the number of people in the building. Go to bed, Vivienne, Elliot said, standing. Smoothing his trousers. Already moving on, the way he moved on from everything, efficiently, without looking back. We can talk more tomorrow when we've both had some rest. I don't want to go to bed. You need to rest. For the baby. And there it was. The baby. He had learned, somewhere in the last few months, that those 2 words were the most effective way to end any conversation with her. Because no matter what was happening between them, no matter how loud the alarm bells were getting, she would always choose the baby. He knew that. He was using it. She went to bed. She lay in the dark, her hands on her stomach, listening to him move around downstairs, the clink of a glass, the low murmur of a phone call he thought she couldn't hear, the sound of the back door opening and then closing again 30 seconds later. She stared at the ceiling and thought about the woman in the photograph. The laugh. The hand on his jaw. His closed eyes. She thought about the floral scent she had been smelling on his collar for 2 months. She thought about the closed study door, the face-down phone, the missed prenatal appointments, the 45 seconds he had spent in the nursery she had built with her own hands. She thought about the way he had said there is no one else without blinking. And then she did something she had not done since the night her mother died. She pressed her face into the pillow and she cried, not the clean, photogenic kind of crying, but the raw, ugly, silent kind, the kind that shakes your whole body and leaves you hollow and wrung out and somehow, paradoxically, slightly more capable of facing what comes next. She cried until she couldn't anymore. Then she wiped her face. Took 3 slow breaths. Put both hands back on her stomach. It's okay, she whispered to the baby. To herself. To the darkness. I am going to figure this out. The next morning, Elliot was gone before she woke up. There was a note on the kitchen counter, written in his precise, architectural handwriting, early meeting. Don't overdo it today. Not I love you. Not we'll talk tonight. Just instructions. A single initial. She stood at the kitchen island in her robe, reading the note 3 times, and then she folded it in half and put it in the drawer where she had been keeping all his notes for the last 4 months, a small, unconscious archive of a marriage going cold, documented in his own hand. She had not planned to keep them. She had just never thrown them away. Mrs. Alderton arrived at 8:30 and moved through the house with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had worked in wealthy households long enough to understand that the most important skill in her profession was the ability to see everything and acknowledge nothing. But that morning she paused in the kitchen doorway and looked at Vivienne, really looked, the way people only look when they've decided that saying nothing is no longer something they can live with, and said, "Mrs. Weston. Are you all right?" Vivienne looked up from her coffee. Manufactured a smile. "I'm fine, Mrs. Alderton. Just tired." The housekeeper held her gaze for a moment. Then she nodded, the way people nod when they know they're being lied to and have decided to respect the lie for now. "I'll make you some breakfast," she said. And turned back to the stove. Vivienne sat at the island and watched the woman move around the kitchen and felt the particular loneliness of being cared for by someone who was paid to care for you, in a house that had your name on the deed and none of your warmth in the walls, and she thought, not for the first time, but for the first time with any real clarity, that she needed to know the truth. Not the truth Elliot was willing to give her. The actual truth. She picked up her phone. Opened the browser. And began, with shaking hands and a steadiness of purpose that surprised even herself, to think about how a woman in her position might begin to find out exactly what her husband was hiding. She started with the jacket. Not the one from the dinner party, Elliot had taken that one with him, and the photograph with it, which told her everything she needed to know about how carefully he was managing the evidence of his own life. She started with the gray wool jacket he had worn to a charity function 2 weeks earlier, the one hanging in the far corner of his dressing room behind the row of identical navy suits he rotated through the working week like a man who had decided that consistency in clothing was a form of control. She went through every pocket. Methodically. Without rushing. In the left breast pocket she found a folded receipt from a restaurant called Maison Verlaine. She knew the name. It was the kind of place that didn't appear on any public list, the kind of place you only knew about if someone who mattered had taken you there. Elliot had taken her there exactly once, on their first anniversary, and he had known every member of the staff by name, which she had found romantic at the time and now found simply informative. The receipt was dated 6 weeks ago. A Thursday. She checked her phone calendar. 6 weeks ago on a Thursday, Elliot had told her he was having dinner with his legal team ahead of the Meridian Tower contract signing. The receipt was for 2 people. The wine alone was $400. There was a dessert she recognized, the salted caramel soufflé that took 20 minutes to prepare and that the chef only made for guests who had reserved it in advance, which meant it had been planned, which meant this had not been a spontaneous business dinner but something arranged with intention and anticipation. She photographed the receipt with her phone. Placed it back exactly as she had found it. In the right outer pocket she found nothing. In the right inner pocket she found a small card, cream-colored, no bigger than a business card, with a single line of handwriting on it that was not Elliot's. The handwriting was looped and deliberate, the kind of handwriting that belonged to someone who had been told at some point in their life that they had beautiful penmanship and had taken it seriously ever since. It said, "Thursday can't come fast enough." Vivienne stood in her husband's dressing room, holding the card between two fingers, and felt the floor shift beneath her in a way that had nothing to do with pregnancy and everything to do with the particular vertigo of a world reorganizing itself around a truth you can no longer refuse to see. She turned the card over. Nothing on the back. No number. No last name. Just that single letter, doing the work of an entire person. She photographed the card. Put it back. Walked out of the dressing room and sat on the edge of the bed and breathed through her nose for 30 seconds the way Dr. Harmon had taught her for managing anxiety, which struck her now as deeply ironic because Dr. Harmon was Elliot's recommended physician and she had no idea anymore how much of her life had been curated by a man she was only now beginning to actually see. Then she picked up her phone and called Cora. Cora answered on the second ring, which was one of the things Vivienne loved most about her. She always answered, no matter what time it was, no matter what she was in the middle of, as though she had decided years ago that Vivienne's calls went to the front of every queue. "Viv. Hey. How are you feeling? How's the baby?" "The baby is fine." Vivienne kept her voice low, her eyes on the bedroom door. "Cora, I need you to help me find someone." A pause. "What kind of someone?" "A woman. First initial S, connected to Elliot." "Possibly," she stopped. Started again. "Possibly someone he's been seeing." The silence on the other end of the line was the specific silence of a best friend who has been holding a concern for a long time and has just been given permission to put it down. "Viv," Cora said carefully. "How long have you suspected? How long have you?" Another pause. "Longer this time. Since the gala in March. He arrived alone. He told you it was a last-minute work conflict, remember? I saw him there, Viv. He wasn't alone." The bedroom walls moved slightly closer together. "You didn't tell me," Vivienne said. "Not an accusation. Just a fact, sitting there between them. You were 4 months pregnant. You were so happy." "I didn't," Cora's voice broke at the edges. "I'm sorry. I should have told you. I've been telling myself every week that I should tell you." "Who was she?" "I didn't get a name. I only saw her for a moment before he moved her to a different part of the room. She was young. Dark hair. The kind of beautiful that makes you feel like the room reorganized itself around her when she walked in. A beat. She was wearing a red dress. I remember because it was the kind of red that you don't wear to an event like that unless you want to be seen." Vivienne closed her eyes. In the photograph from the jacket pocket, the woman had been wearing a red dress. "Her name starts with S," Vivienne said. "Okay." Cora's voice had shifted, sharper now, focused, the voice she used when she had moved from feeling into problem solving. "Okay. I'm going to make some calls. I know someone who works in Elliot's building." Discreetly. "Viv, I need you to listen to me very carefully, do not confront him again until we know more. Do you understand? Not until we have something solid. He'll know I'm looking. Only if you let him. Keep doing exactly what you've been doing. Keep being the good wife. Keep wearing the dresses he picks out and attending the dinners he plans. Can you do that?" Vivienne looked at herself in the mirror across the room, the small, exhausted woman in the oversized robe, hands on her stomach, sitting in the middle of a bed the size of a small country in a house that had never felt less like home. "Yes," she said. "I can do that." She did it for 11 days. 11 days of cream silk and careful smiles and dinner on the table at 7 and questions about the Meridian project that she asked not because she cared but because asking kept him comfortable, kept him talking, kept him in the warm bath of believing that everything was exactly as he had arranged it. She was a better actress than she had ever given herself credit for. Elliot, for his part, was easier to manage now that she understood what she was managing. The pattern was clear once she stopped trying to explain it away. Mondays and Thursdays he worked late, always Mondays and Thursdays, always with a different excuse that she now catalogued with the detachment of a researcher noting data. The phone went face down every time she entered the room. He showered immediately upon arriving home on those particular evenings, which she now understood was not a hygiene preference but an erasure. On the other nights, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Fridays, he was almost the man she had married. Present. Warm. His hand occasionally finding hers at dinner. Asking about the baby with something that looked, from a distance, like genuine interest. It was these nights that were the most disorienting, because they reminded her of everything she was losing, and because they made her wonder, in her darkest moments, whether a woman could love two versions of the same man simultaneously and hate them both equally. On the 8th day, Cora called. Her name is Serena Alcott, Cora said, without preamble. She's 28. She works in acquisitions at a firm that does business regularly with Weston Group. They met 18 months ago at an industry conference in Milan. 18 months. Vivienne did the arithmetic involuntarily, the way you can't help counting backward when a number hits you that way. 18 months ago she and Elliot had been trying for a baby. 18 months ago he had held her hand in Dr. Harmon's office and listened to the options and said, with complete sincerity, "Whatever you need, Viv. We do this together." 18 months ago he had already met Serena Alcott. "There's more," Cora said. "Tell me." She was at the Meridian Tower launch event last month. The one you didn't attend because you weren't feeling well. My contact says she was introduced to several board members as a, Cora paused, and the pause contained everything. As a close personal friend of Elliot's. The room was very quiet. Outside the window, the garden was doing its indifferent, beautiful thing, the roses her mother-in-law had planted 15 years ago blooming with the kind of commitment that required no emotional investment whatsoever. "Is she in love with him?" Vivienne asked. She wasn't sure why that question came out first. It surprised her. "I don't know," Cora said honestly. "But Viv, my contact said something else. She said that people in that office have known about this for months. That it is not," another pause, "that it is not considered a secret among people who work close to Elliot." The implication settled over her slowly, like cold water rising. Everyone knew. His colleagues. His board members. The people who sat across from her at dinner parties and asked how she was feeling and admired her pregnancy and said Elliot was such a lucky man, they all knew. They had known, perhaps, longer than she had been pregnant. They had looked at her across candlelit tables with their careful sympathy and their graceful exits and their half-second too long hugs and said absolutely nothing. She was the last to know. She was always going to be the last to know. "Cora," she said quietly. "I need you to come here." "I'm already packing," Cora said. Cora arrived on a Thursday. Vivienne had chosen Thursday deliberately. She had learned, in the 11 days of careful performance, that Thursdays were the days Elliot disappeared until at least 11 at night, which gave them 3 clear hours minimum, 3 hours in which she could breathe without monitoring her own face, speak without measuring her words, and exist in her own home without the constant low-grade vigilance that had become as exhausting as a second job. She met Cora at the door before Mrs. Alderton could, because Mrs. Alderton noticed everything and Vivienne needed this visit to be as unremarkable as possible. Just 2 old friends. Just a pregnant woman having her best friend over for dinner. Nothing strategic. Nothing urgent. Nothing that would filter back through the careful ecosystem of staff and associates that surrounded Elliot Weston like a nervous system. Cora walked in, took one look at Vivienne, and pulled her into a hug that lasted a long time and said everything neither of them had adequate words for yet. "You've lost weight," Cora said, pulling back and looking at her with the frank, unflinching assessment that only very old friends are permitted. You can't lose weight when you're 31 weeks pregnant, Cora. Your face has lost weight. Your eyes have lost weight. She cupped Vivienne's face in both hands briefly. How are you sleeping? Poorly. Eating? Adequately. Vivienne. I'm functioning, Vivienne said firmly. That's what matters right now. Come inside. She had made tea herself, in the kitchen, because she needed the physical occupation of it, something to do with her hands, something ordinary and warm to set against the cold machinery of what they were about to discuss. They sat at the kitchen island, just the two of them, and Vivienne laid out everything she had found in careful sequence. The receipt from Maison Verlaine. The card with the single initial. The pattern of Mondays and Thursdays. Cora's information about Serena Alcott. The 18 months. The board members who had been introduced to her as a close personal friend. Cora listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. She was a woman who processed out loud, who talked through her thinking in real time, who filled silence the way water fills a container, naturally, completely, without effort. Her silence now was the most serious thing in the room. When Vivienne finished, Cora wrapped both hands around her mug and looked at the counter for a long moment. You need to see a lawyer, she said. I know. Before he knows you're looking. Before he has any indication that you're thinking about. I know, Cora. Because the moment he knows, the assets move. These men, she stopped herself. Recalibrated. Elliot specifically. He didn't build a $3 billion empire by being slow to protect his interests. The moment he feels threatened, everything liquid will be somewhere you can't touch it within 48 hours. I've seen it happen. Vivienne nodded. She had thought about this too, in the small hours when she couldn't sleep. She had lain in the dark and thought about the practicalities of her situation with a clarity that had surprised her, a kind of cold, precise thinking that she suspected was what happened to a person when fear got large enough to burn away everything soft and leave only what was necessary. I have nothing in my own name, she said. The house is his. The accounts are his. I had a savings account before we married, $11,000. I transferred it into our joint account in the first year. She paused. He suggested it. He said it made financial sense. I thought it was romantic. Cora closed her eyes briefly. Okay. That's not nothing, legally. Joint accounts are marital assets. Depending on the state. His lawyers wrote the prenuptial agreement. The silence that followed was a different quality from the one before. Heavier. More specific. How bad is it? Cora asked. I signed it without having my own legal counsel review it. Vivienne said this the way you admit a thing you've been ashamed of for a long time, quickly, cleanly, looking straight ahead. He said it was standard. He said it was just a formality. His lawyer explained it to me and she stopped. I was 29 years old and I was in love and I trusted him completely and I signed it. Cora set her mug down very carefully. What does it say? In the event of divorce initiated by either party, I am entitled to a fixed sum, $250,000, and no claim on any business assets, property or investments acquired before or during the marriage. She recited it from memory. She had read it so many times in the last 11 days that she could have written it out verbatim in the dark. The baby changes it slightly, there would be child support. But the amount is capped and the formula is in his favor. That prenup may not be enforceable, Cora said immediately. If you signed without independent legal counsel, if there was any coercion or withholding of information. I know. That's why I need a lawyer. Vivienne looked at her. Someone Elliot doesn't know. Someone completely outside his network. I have someone, Cora said. Her name is Diana Marsh. She's in the city. She's handled 3 cases I know of personally against men like Elliot, and she won all 3. She reached across the island and covered Vivienne's hand with hers. We're going to get you out of this. Vivienne looked down at their joined hands. Then at her own stomach. Then back at Cora. I'm not ready to leave yet, she said quietly. Cora blinked. Viv. I need more. I need something so solid that even his lawyers can't spin it. The prenup, the assets, all of that is complicated and slow, and he has a battalion of people who do nothing but protect him financially. But if I can document enough, the affair, the emotional manipulation, the gaslighting, if I can build a case that goes beyond the financial, she stopped. Straightened. I need him to show me who he really is. Fully. I need to see the whole thing before I move. Cora studied her face for a long time. That's dangerous, Vivienne. The longer you stay in this. I know the risk. Do you? Because men like Elliot, Cora lowered her voice even though they were alone. When they feel cornered, Viv, they don't just get cold. They get something else. Something uglier. And you are 31 weeks pregnant in his house and I am 600 miles away, Anne. I have Mrs. Alderton. Mrs. Alderton works for him. The sentence dropped between them and sat there. Vivienne had not let herself think that thought all the way through before. She thought it now, fully, and it rearranged several things in her understanding of her own situation. How long can you stay? She asked. As long as you need me. Elliot came home at 11:14 that night. Vivienne heard his car on the gravel from the bedroom where she and Cora had been sitting on the bed with the door locked, speaking in low voices, building the architecture of a plan that was still more instinct than strategy but was growing more solid by the hour. At the sound of the car, Cora looked at her. Go, Vivienne said quietly. Guest room. Don't come out until morning. Viv. I can handle him. Go. Cora went. Vivienne unlocked the bedroom door, turned the bedside lamp to its lowest setting, positioned herself against the pillows with a book open in her lap, a performance of a woman who had been reading peacefully all evening, and waited. She heard him downstairs. The familiar sequence, keys on the hook by the door, shoes on the rack, the particular pattern of his footsteps crossing the entrance hall. Then a deviation. He was on the phone. His voice was too low to make out words, but the tone was intimate, private, the tone she recognized now with a clarity she wished she didn't have. She heard him laugh. It was the real laugh. The unguarded one. The one that had made her fall in love with him. She kept her eyes on the page of her book and did not move and breathed slowly and told herself that the sound of her husband laughing at 11:14 on a Thursday night at something she hadn't said was just information. Just data. Nothing more than that. He was still on the phone when he came upstairs. She heard him stop outside the bedroom door, a pause of perhaps 5 seconds, and then his voice dropped lower still, and then the call ended, and the door opened. He looked at her. She looked at him. You're still awake, he said. Couldn't sleep, she said. Turned a page she hadn't read. He nodded. Moved to the dressing room. She heard the familiar sounds of a man removing the evidence of his evening, jacket on the hanger, cufflinks in the dish, shower running. 11 minutes. She had timed it once, idly, and then understood why she had timed it, and then put that understanding somewhere she could look at it properly later. He came out of the bathroom in a cloud of his own cedar and black pepper scent, scrubbed clean, and climbed into bed beside her. How was your day? He asked. The way people ask when they already know the answer will be fine and are asking only because not asking would be noticeable. Quiet, she said. I had a friend over for dinner. A pause. Subtle. Almost imperceptible. Anyone I know? No, she said. Turned another page. He reached over and turned off his bedside lamp. Settled against the pillow. Was breathing slowly and regularly within 6 minutes in the way of a man with an entirely clear conscience, which was either evidence of complete innocence or a sociopathy so refined it had become indistinguishable from peace. She lay in the dark beside him and thought about Serena Alcott in her red dress. About a receipt from Maison Verlaine. About a card that said, "Thursday can't come fast enough." About 18 months. About a prenuptial agreement she had signed without reading properly because she had been 29 years old and in love and she had trusted him completely. She thought about all of it, slowly and carefully, and then she placed both hands on her stomach and made herself a promise. She was going to find everything. She was going to document everything. And when the time came, when she had enough, when the case was solid and the exit was planned and the ground beneath her feet was as certain as she could make it, she was going to walk out of this house and she was never coming back. But first, she needed proof. The proof came looking for her. She had not expected that. She had been building her plan carefully, methodically, the way you build something in the dark, slowly, by feel, making sure each piece was solid before adding the next. She had made contact with Diana Marsh through Cora, a brief encrypted message exchange that Cora had set up on a phone she had brought with her from the city, a prepaid device that Vivienne now kept taped behind the false bottom of the drawer in her nightstand where she stored the baby's first scanned photographs, the one place in the house she was certain Elliot would never look, because he had never once opened that drawer. She had begun documenting dates, times, observations. The Monday and Thursday pattern. The receipts she photographed and stored in the cloud on the prepaid phone. Small things, building toward something larger, the way individual threads build toward a rope you can actually hold your weight on. She had been doing this for 9 days when the proof came looking for her. It was a Wednesday morning. Elliot had left for the office at 7, which was normal. Cora had gone back to the city 4 days earlier, which had felt like losing a limb but was necessary. Elliot had begun asking questions about how long she was planning to stay, with the particular pleasantness of a man communicating something that is not pleasant at all, and Vivienne had recognized the signal and told Cora it was time. They spoke twice a day on the prepaid phone. It was enough. It had to be enough. Mrs. Alderton was in the East Wing cleaning. Vivienne was in Elliot's study. She had not planned to go into the study. She had come downstairs for water, had paused in the hallway outside the study door, and had noticed, for the first time, though she could not understand how she had not noticed before, that the door was not fully closed. Elliot always closed his study door completely. Even when he was not in the house. Even when there was no conceivable reason for the door to be closed, it was closed, because the study was the room that held his private life most completely, the room where the calls happened, where the real decisions were made, where the version of Elliot that did not exist in public took up the most space. The door was open by perhaps 4 inches. She stood in the hallway and looked at those 4 inches for a long moment. Then she pushed the door open and walked in. The study was immaculate, because Elliot's study was always immaculate. He was a man who believed that physical order was a form of power, that a clean desk communicated control the way nothing else did. But he had left in a hurry that morning. She had heard the urgency in his footsteps, the abbreviated goodbye, the front door closing with slightly more force than usual. And in the haste of that departure he had done something he almost never did. He had left his laptop open. She crossed the room. Stood in front of the desk. The screen had dimmed but not locked, it was still running, the desktop visible, a browser window open behind his email client. She touched the trackpad and the screen brightened. She should have looked at the email. That was the logical move, the strategic one, the thing that would have produced the clean, documentable evidence she had been building toward. But what caught her eye was not the email client. It was the browser window behind it, open to what appeared to be a property listing website. She clicked it to the front. It took her a moment to understand what she was looking at. The listing was for a private residence, a penthouse apartment in the Halcyon building on the other side of the city. 3 bedrooms. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A terrace with a view of the river. The listing price was $2.4 million, and across the top of the page, in the green text that property websites use to indicate status, were the words, "Sale agreed, completion pending." She stared at it. Then she scrolled down, because something in her chest was telling her to keep going, telling her that this was not random, that there was something more here, and that she needed to see all of it before she let herself understand what she was looking at. At the bottom of the listing page there was a notes field, a private annotation visible only to the buyer, used to store completion details, solicitor contacts, that kind of thing. Elliot had typed in it. Just a few lines. Completion date, 6 weeks. Keys to S on the 14th, make sure the master bedroom is ready before she sees it. She's already chosen the curtains. The room was very quiet. Vivienne read the note 3 times. Then she took the prepaid phone from the pocket of her cardigan where she had taken to carrying it always, and she photographed the screen. She photographed the listing. She photographed the notes field. She photographed the completion date and the sale agreed status and every detail she could fit in the frame. Then she stepped back from the desk. Put the phone back in her pocket. And stood in the center of her husband's study with her hands pressed flat against her stomach, breathing carefully, thinking with the cold and terrible clarity that had become her most reliable companion in the last 3 weeks. He was buying Serena Alcott an apartment. $2.4 million. Keys on the 14th. She had already chosen the curtains. This was not a man having an affair he intended to end. This was not a lapse in judgment or a moment of weakness or any of the other constructions a person builds around the thing they cannot face. This was a man making permanent arrangements. Planning a parallel life with the same methodical intentionality he brought to every other acquisition, because that was what this was, she understood now. An acquisition. Serena Alcott was something Elliot had decided he wanted, and Elliot Weston did not leave the things he wanted to chance. Which meant that Vivienne herself, pregnant, dependent, living in his house on his terms under a prenuptial agreement designed to ensure she left with as little as possible, Vivienne was the complication. The liability. The thing that needed to be managed until it could be dispensed with cleanly. She was not his wife. She was a problem he had not yet solved. She walked out of the study. Pulled the door to exactly the 4-inch gap she had found it at. Went to the kitchen. Drank her glass of water standing at the sink, looking out at the garden, watching the roses bloom with their infuriating indifference. Then she picked up the prepaid phone and called Cora. "I need Diana Marsh's first available appointment," she said, when Cora answered. "Not next week. Not Thursday. Tomorrow." "Viv, what happened?" "He's buying her an apartment. $2.4 million. Completion in 6 weeks." Her voice was completely steady. She had moved through something in the last 10 minutes, moved through the shock and the grief and the horror and come out the other side into a place that was quiet and cold and absolutely resolute. He is setting up a life for her. Which means he has a plan for me. And I need to be ahead of it. Cora made a sound that was not quite a word. "Then, I'll call Diana right now. I'll get you in tomorrow morning." "Thank you. Viv." Cora's voice dropped. "Are you okay?" Vivienne looked out at the garden. At the roses. At the wall at the far end that enclosed the property, beyond which the city continued its enormous, indifferent life. "Not yet," she said. "But I'm going to be." She hung up. Put the phone back in her pocket. Placed both hands on her stomach and felt the baby move, a decisive, rolling movement, a small body asserting its presence in the way it had been doing for weeks now, as though it understood, on some level below language, that its mother needed reminding that there was something worth fighting for. "I know," she whispered. "I know." She spent the rest of that Wednesday in a state of performed normalcy so complete that she almost impressed herself. She ate lunch. She called her prenatal nurse for a routine check-in. She folded baby clothes in the nursery, the small soft things she had been accumulating for months, and placed them in the handcrafted dresser she had assembled herself, and she did all of this with the steady hands and the calm face of a woman who had not, 2 hours earlier, discovered that her husband was purchasing a luxury apartment for the woman he had been sleeping with for 18 months. When Elliot came home at 7:30, a Wednesday, not a Thursday, she noted, apparently even his schedule of betrayal had some flexibility, she had dinner on the table and a question about the Meridian project ready on her lips and a smile that had cost her more than anything she had ever performed. He sat down. Poured wine for himself. Water for her. And they ate dinner together, in the dining room where 8 guests had witnessed the beginning of the end 3 weeks ago, and he talked about the Meridian project and she asked the right questions and the candles burned down and nothing in the room would have suggested to an outside observer that anything was wrong. She was thinking about Diana Marsh. About the photograph on the laptop screen. About the note at the bottom of the listing. She's already chosen the curtains. You seem quiet tonight, Elliot said. She looked up. He was watching her with the attentiveness he deployed occasionally, the kind that felt like care but functioned more like surveillance, the watching of a man checking whether something he owns is still where he left it. Just tired, she said. Smiled. The baby was restless last night. He nodded. Reached across the table and covered her hand with his briefly, the gesture so practiced, so perfectly calibrated to the role he was currently playing, that she had to concentrate very carefully on keeping her hand still beneath his instead of pulling it away. Not long now, he said. 8 weeks. Everything's going to change. She looked at him across the candlelight. At the face she had loved completely. At the man she had believed, without reservation, was the safest place she had ever found. Yes, she said quietly. It is. He smiled. Went back to his food. She went back to hers. And underneath the table, in the pocket of her cardigan, her hand closed around the prepaid phone, and she held it there like a weapon she was not yet ready to draw, and she thought about 6 weeks, and completion dates, and curtains that another woman had already chosen, and she thought about what a woman with nothing but her own intelligence, a best friend, and a very good lawyer could build in 6 weeks when her life and her child's future depended on it. She thought about all of that, and for the first time since she had found the photograph in the dinner jacket pocket, she felt something move through her that was not grief, not fear, not the hollow vertigo of a world reorganizing itself around an unbearable truth. It felt, she realized, like the very beginning of fury. And fury, she was discovering, was something she could work with. She was loading the dishwasher after dinner, Elliot having retired to his study with the door closed as usual, when her phone buzzed on the counter. Not the prepaid phone, her regular phone, the one he had access to, the one she carried without secrets because all her secrets lived elsewhere now. It was a text from an unknown number. She almost ignored it. She almost left it for later, finished the dishwasher, went upstairs. But something made her pick it up. The message was 4 words long. We need to talk. She stared at it. Unknown number. No name. No context. She typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came in 11 seconds. "My name is Serena. I think you already know who I am. And I think you need to hear what I have to say before he does something that neither of us can come back from." The dishwasher hummed. The kitchen clock ticked. Somewhere upstairs, a door opened and closed. Vivienne stood very still, her phone in her hand, her heart beating with a steadiness that had taken her 31 weeks of pregnancy and 3 weeks of quiet devastation to find, and she read the message one more time. Then, from the hallway above the kitchen, she heard Elliot's voice. He was on the phone again. The study door was not fully closed. His voice carried down the stairwell, low and certain, in the tone she recognized now like a frequency tuned specifically to cause her pain. She heard him say a name. Serena. And then, clearly, without ambiguity, without any possible misinterpretation, she heard him say the words that took everything she had been holding together and drove a fault line straight through the center of it. "Don't worry about Vivienne," he said. "She doesn't suspect anything. She never does. She sees exactly what I let her see and nothing more." A pause. A low laugh. "The real one. The unguarded one. She's too trusting. Always has been. It's honestly the thing I counted on most." The dishwasher finished its cycle. The kitchen fell silent. Vivienne set her phone down on the counter very carefully, screen up, Serena's message still glowing on the screen, and she stood in the kitchen of the house that had her name on no document anywhere, carrying the child of a man who had just described her love for him as the thing he had exploited most completely, and she felt the fury she had discovered at dinner stop being a beginning and become something much, much larger. She did not cry. She picked up the phone. Typed one word back to Serena. "When?" If you found this story gripping, don't go anywhere. Part 2 is where everything explodes. Serena walks through the front door of the mansion. Elliot's mask comes completely off. And Vivienne discovers a secret so devastating it will change every decision she makes from this moment forward. Make sure you're subscribed so Part 2 lands straight in your feed the moment it drops. And drop a comment below, did you see that ending coming? Because Vivienne certainly didn't.